Hi folks, this is all the fruit, and today I want to show you what you can forage in Heidelberg, Germany in September. September is usually at the peak of the fruit season, but this year the fruit season has been quite unsatisfactory so far. This parking lot has been a construction site for years. Neglected spots like this can often yield a lot of interesting stuff. Oh, look at that! Silverberry season. So it's the first days of September and they're already flowering. That means those might be ripe. Look, there is one bud opening. Those will be ripe for New Year's. One of our very rare fruits which not just last on the branch for months in winter and spring, but which actually ripen in winter and spring. Very invasive in some parts of Europe, by the way. Black nightshade. This one is hanging full of fruits, and the first bunches are already ripening. It's one of those fruits where some Westerners say that they are toxic. However, there are hundreds of millions, probably billions of people who consume this regularly and are still doing fine. However, there are also a couple 100 million people who consume the green fruits, and the green fruits are toxic, meaning that, yeah, not everything that it's eaten is also edible, but the ripe ones. As if to eat and tasty. I saw the leaves of this pear tree, and first I thought it has no fruits, but then I realized it's one of those small ornamental pears. Yeah, those are pears, folks. Either some wild pear or some ornamental hybrid or variety. And it also seems that this ornamental thing is just the rootstock, because, well, I'm not sure if it's the rootstock. The fruits on the upper part look very similar, but the leaves seem to be a lot smaller. Anyways, this stuff is not good. Elderberry season is at its end, at least for this plant. Not much left to harvest here. Somebody's little garden on that balcony. Grapevines, peppers, parsley, basil, eggplants, chilies, and the best, ripe strawberries in this square brown box. A lot of the little streets here in the old town of Heidelberg are so narrow. There is no space for gardens or any greenery on them. Since I'm in the old town near the Baroque church, let's check if it's open. There are good figs in the garden. Beautiful church, and gotcha, the door is open. However, the figs are not ripe yet. Here in Germany, most traditional varieties have two distinct crops, the summer and autumn figs. Yes, I checked, we really do call them like this in Germany. It's not just me. Some trees already have the autumn figs ripening. I see only one ripe fig on this one. It's on the tall branches. They're not climbing up for one fig. Here is one, which is still hard. What else do they have in the church garden? Plums, apricots, private. It's a beautiful garden. I like being here, and anyways, they don't harvest most of the figs. If you have a well-bearing fig tree, usually, well, here in the German climate you cannot collect them for drying. The climate is too wet for them. So if you have a fig tree which is bearing a lot of figs, basically, yeah, sharing is a very Christian thing. Interesting. Those grapes came too late, folks, too late. They are not gonna ripen properly this year. Topinambur. This is a a relative of the sunflower. Well, actually it is a sunflower, but you don't eat the seeds, you eat the tubers. However, I'm not gonna start digging out tubers in the church garden. Rose hips are a very important foraging resource for food. And this tea, this one is already soft. Nice and tasty, just beware of the itching powder. You see those little hairs? They are very spiny. But the tiny part of the fruit I was managed to get is so sweet and flavorful. I love those things. You might think, jackpot. Here I got tons of really big, nice rose hips, but those modern rose cultivars, their hips are, yeah, it's basically like wood. They're dry and tasteless, unfortunately. And here, by the way, a little feral fig must be a child of this one. Yeah, with climate change and with figs becoming common fruit trees around here, feral figs also getting quite common. No fruits on this blue passion flower. What a pity. So this feral peach tree from the bus, I'm pretty sure this is not planted. Basically, whenever you throw away a peach or a nectarine seed, a tree grows out of it, and it's a bit unusual. What I wanted to say, it's a little bit unusual for them to have ripe fruits in September. Yeah. Tastes like all those typical peaches, those seedling peaches. They're often called vineyard peaches because people used to have them in the vineyards. Well, they are hairier than normal peaches. This one is not too hairy. Also, the fruits are usually quite small. Those are not too small. Then those fruits are completely greenish yellowish. Maybe they get a little bit more yellowish. Look at that. This one is clearly overripe and fallen to the ground. It's pale yellow. Surprisingly sweet, especially for growing here more or less in the shade. And very aromatic. Yeah, that's it. Usually it doesn't matter much what type of peach fruits the seed comes from. You throw the seed somewhere in the park, you take it from a flat peach. Oh, what are those people driving? You take it from a flat peach, you take it from a nectarine, you take it from a yellow flesh peach. That's what you will usually get. They are not true to seed, but definitely good enough. A lot of stuff can grow in such a neglected park, especially when new trees were planted. I'm still eating my peach. Soil from somewhere else has been brought in. For example, again, black nightshade fruits. The amaranth is also edible, but I'm not a big fan of it. Yeah, fortunately the fallopian, this vine here, is not edible. Pretty shady place. Without the shade there might be more growing here because there doesn't seem to be a lot of care for this place. That's a zaharinum, one of the species they use in North America for sugar, for maple sugar. No, and here that's a pseudoplatanus, the species that was used in European mountains for sugar production. They don't do it anymore because it's not as productive as the American maples. However, the timber of this European maple is pretty valuable, so it makes more sense to harvest the timber than to harvest the maple syrup. Let's see what we have here. Burdock, some species of Arctium. In Asia, it's being cultivated for its roots. Some sort of wild, those different types of wild corn here. I think this is some sorghum, and this is a close relative of sorghum, but both species are not edible. Tasty lamb's quarters here. Good wild salad. And here Lactuca seriola, the wild ancestor of the common lettuce. And here a little bit hidden, an absinthe plant. Absinthe is very common in Mannheim, in the nearby city of Mannheim, not so common in Heidelberg, but you find it from time to time. And here some what is this called? Pokeweed? Yeah, pokeweed, the incredibly toxic pokeweed, which nevertheless has been used for food, but shouldn't be used for food because it's just too risky. Hibiscus syriacus, the Syrian hibiscus, which for some funny reason is the national flower not of Syria, but of South Korea. It is kind of invasive here, as you can see from the many, I think those are seedlings. They could be suckers, but usually they are seedlings around here. The flower is edible. It's not as, it doesn't have this strong taste and strong sourness like the hibiscus that's used for tea, but it is edible and not bad. The fruit is also edible. When we were kids in kindergarten, the adults always taught us that this stuff is toxic. We would call it little cobs of corn. It grew. It grew in our kindergarten. We ate the seeds and we never get poisoned. Nowadays I know that in this case the adults were wrong and the stuff is edible, but still folks, if people tell you something is toxic, don't eat it unless you are like 200% sure that you are right and it's edible, because yeah, if I had eaten everything the adults told me was toxic as a child, I would have died. I ate a couple things and was lucky, but don't do this. Cordial cherry season seems to be over. Every year I try to eat at least a couple, not too many because they cause constipation, but I missed it. However, here already the buds for next year. Those are quite important in Bulgarian folklore. We use them in some winter rituals, but yeah, the edible fruits are completely gone. Tasty chickweed. Whenever there is enough water and temperatures above freezing, this stuff can grow in every month of the year, and it provides you with quite large quantities of nice tasty salad. It tastes a little bit fatty, a little bit nutty. It's a good taste. Colchicum autumnale. Don't confuse this with saffron. It's very toxic. It's so toxic that its cytotoxicity is used for science to fixate dividing cells. In Bulgaria we call it the what would you say, the your mantle. So basically whenever you see this thing flowering in autumn, you should take a needle and thread and repair your winter clothes, because you're gonna need them soon, because winter's coming. So we could basically call this the Game of Thrones flower. A sad story. There used to be a population of European toads here in this area. Oh, look at that, the cute doggies. Big population of European toads which used to lay their eggs in this pond like over 30 years, about 30 years ago. And every year I would come and fish them out because they were not able to get out, and this was before the time of Nowadays, basically helping frogs and toads is a German national sport. But yeah, back then for a couple years I would fish out the whole population of nasty warty toads out of here and allow them to go back into the forest. But I was a high school student back then, so I wasn't too responsible and also didn't have time all the time. So one year I missed them and they all drowned and we never saw them again. It's a pity because toads, they can get up to 40 years old, so this population of adult breeding population must have been very old. And yeah, basically I was the reason it existed for a couple more years, but at the end I was kind of also the reason that it disappeared. Cotoneaster. Most species have edible fruits, however some of the most prolific ones have horribly bitter fruits. They taste like a boring apple, but you can also find them through winter and spring. On the ground, huge population of Aliaria petiolata, the garlic mustard. Also, you could eat the soft parts of those thistles, and there is a beauty berry in the background which is almost ripe, but I think they should be completely ripe in order to consume them. And here, of course, the dandelion, a bitter fruit a lot of people like. And here the stingless nettle. It's not a nettle, it's in a completely different family, but you can suck out the nectar from the flowers. However, with me usually it doesn't work too well. Viburnum lantana, one of the less edible species of Viburnum. It also looks a bit disgusting, like brown poo. It is edible, sweet, and has some type of fruity flavor. Yeah, edible, but nothing special. Here the flowering quince is flowering out of season. Normally it would be flowering in spring. And here is an unripe fruit. In our area this is just an ornamental, but in northern China or Russia or the Baltics, where you cannot grow other quince species, this is basically their fruit shrub, which is a substitute for the quince. And here Geum urbanum, they would use it as a substitute for cloves in olden times. And here, of course, beautiful little daisies, totally edible. Every part of the daisy is edible. I prefer the flowers. We will have a bumper crop of honey locusts this year. So many that on this tree the fruits are actually really small. I like them when I get them in a tasty condition, but 80% of all I've tried were very disgusting, so I'm very careful with this thing. It can be tasty, but usually it's just bleh. And here, a mallow. Would say this is Malva sylvestris var mauritiana. It's being used a lot in seed mixes. Flowers are edible. Leaves are edible. But as usual, the most nutrients are in the fruits, in those little cheeselets. Old Germans always taught me the story how they would get a buttered piece of bread by their mothers. It would be sent out in the hungry years after World War II, and they would collect those cheeselets and put them on top of their buttered bread. And they still swear those things don't only look like cheeselets, they also taste like cheese. Fuchsia magellanica, a popular ornamental, but did you know that it also has edible fruits? This one has a lot of fruits, but they are still not ripe. No, I don't see a single ripe one. Well, I'll remember this plant for October and November. Lantana camara, those are going to be dug out in autumn and placed in a greenhouse. They produce edible fruits, but they cannot survive the winters here. Around them, a lot of other tasty edible things planted. A lot of tasty basil, a lot of chilies and sweet potatoes. Not only the tubers of those are edible, but also the whole plant, unlike the normal potato. I should harvest some of those in autumn, shortly before the gardeners harvest them. The mulberry tree. Unfortunately, mulberry season was too short this year. It was very late because the spring was cold and then it got very hot, so the season was cut short. I didn't eat enough mulberries this year. I want more mulberries, but it's September already, and it's more a fruit of June. There is no problem without a solution, and this is a mulberry tree which usually has a second out of season harvest due to something in its timing not going well. This year the second harvest was quite early, in August, in July and August, because the first harvest was so short. You can see all the rotten fruits on the ground. There were years when the main second harvest of this tree was in September. Not now. We got just a couple single fruits. Quite good. Very strong mulberry flavor. Yeah, I must be grateful. 2 tasty mulberries in September is better than no tasty mulberries in September. The colorful Physalis alkekengi. For centuries, this was the only Physalis kind of common in Central Europe. It was considered toxic, that's why it was called the Jewish cherry, because Jews were discriminated against, so a toxic fruit, of course, you would call it after the despised Jews. Well, nowadays we know that Jews are just people like everybody else, and that this fruit actually seems to be edible when it's completely ripe. However, yep, taste almost as good as the Physalis from the supermarket. A bit less sweet and aromatic. Nom 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 nom. Tasty succulents. Tasty but spiny ones, and of course I'm not gonna eat the tiny cactus and other succulent collection of somebody. A peach almond tree. This hardy hybrid is a very popular rootstock in commercial almond growing areas. Here in Germany it's more like an ornamental because it's very hardy, it has very beautiful flowers. The almonds still totally edible. Okay, I'm taking everything back. Those don't feel like peach almonds, those feel really soft. This could be a rare occasion. Yeah, this must be a rare occasion of a true almond growing here in Germany. However, this one fruit was not good and there are not many more on the tree. The difference is basically that the true almonds, it's harder to crack, it's much easier to crack them. What I did with this one I couldn't have done with a peach almond, except if I was the Terminator or somebody else. The shell is like 10 times harder than of the soft-shelled almond. This used to be the biggest shrub in all of Heidelberg. It basically covered most of this house, most of this 3-story house, southern wall. They cut it back. Now it's less than half the size, but it's hanging full of fruits. It used to dwarf this one here. This one, fruit-wise, looks very interesting. Big blue autumn figs. There was one blue one which I don't see anymore, but this one is gonna give a very good autumn harvest. Always check every fig tree or shrub, and sooner or later you'll get lucky. Sooner or later, but not right now. Why has it become so popular to plant stuff in those raised beds? Why can't you make a garden on the ground? Well, capuchin cress, zucchinis. Oh, cucumbers. Look at the cute little cucumbers. The zucchinis don't look so well. There's a ripe one over there. Mangold, chilies, eggplants, and a watermelon plant. I don't see a watermelon fruit, but I hope they harvested at least 1 or 2. A good thing is that figs grow very fast. A bad thing is they grow so fast that people prune them severely. 2 years ago, this was a very good plant. to harvest. It was growing over the sidewalk, now they cut it back and so on. Yeah, it's a constant coming and going, as the Germans say. Beautiful big fire thorn bush. Those used to be very popular in the last decades of the 20th century. They've fallen out of popularity a little bit, but since they get quite old, there are still a lot of them around here. Here there must be two different ones, one with orange and one with bright red fruits. Another one of those things which the adults told us it's toxic. Nope, it's not. In North America, it's being foraged for its fruits. Tastes quite boring, and I guess you should heat it to neutralize the cyanide in the leaves, the cyanide in the seeds. It tastes like a boring apple, but because it's so boring, it usually hangs on the shrub until spring. So a very prolific winter fruit to forage. Oh, is it already Sperrmüll time again? Yeah, in Germany, basically in every neighborhood, once in a month, you put out your stuff on the street and the city comes and picks it up. You put your big trash that doesn't fit in the trash bin. And of course, the day and the night before, it's a big free-for-all for everybody who needs something. However, with this moldy stuff, I don't think anybody will be tempted. But basically, if you don't have too much money, or if you like vintage stuff, this is a way to decorate your flat for free in Germany. I think it's illegal because trash in Germany always belongs to somebody, but usually nobody cares. The Saskatoons are not in season, and also those don't look very good. 10 years ago, the trees growing on the back of this hospital were a very good address for foraging, but now most of them have died, I guess from the drought. I guess they are planted on the roof. Even the tree here and the tree over there that survived, they do look half dead. This rowan here has just a couple puny berries. I see 3, but that reminds me that the service tree, the much bigger and tastier relative of the rowan, should be ripe soon. I have to go and check some of the service trees the next days. Another fig tree that was cut down severely and nothing ripe on it. Some ornamental apples, they are not ripe either. Some roses, yeah, this year the rose flowering season was quite long. I love roses, not so much for eating, they're edible. I love rather to look at them. So I'm happy the season was pretty long this year. Yep, it's definitely Sperrmüll time. I usually don't bother about this because I have enough stuff at my place, but sometimes you find old vintage gardening tools which I need for my work. Well, here there are some old vintage tennis clubs and some old vintage sofas, but no gardening tools here. This giant flowered hibiscus here is also totally edible. And roses. Yeah, pity they are not too tasty. Don't like to eat them so much, but I like to watch them. The laurel cherry. Another one of those things where the Westerners say it's toxic, but the countries where it comes from, people eat it. Not bad. But only eat the totally ripe fruits, folks. Because the unripe ones, they really seem to be toxic. Cotoneaster sansalicifolius relative. Those will have ripe fruits hanging on them until spring, but I think it's one of the bitter varieties. Usually the good ones are the ones with the very few fruits. Here by the way, purslane, favorite summer salad of the ancient world, because it was the only thing that would grow very fast after sparse summer rains. Very good for blood and for digestion and for a couple other things, and also very tasty. Maybe not here where the dogs poo. So now is September 3rd and there are still some edible loquats up on this tree. Not many, and they are shriveled up, but they are totally edible. Let's see. Just a couple days ago there was one edible one on the lower branches, but I left it alone. Now it's not edible anymore. Not much to harvest there, but yeah, September 3rd. There is one on a lower branch, but too far away behind the fence. Yeah, so we managed to prove it. They are loquats in September. Of course, now they have to compete with all those tasty apricots and peaches and plums. They are not as, the loquats are not as exciting now as they are in May, when they just have to compete with a couple fruits, but still, loquats in September. Interesting out of season fruit. I will keep an eye on this one. And in the same garden as the loquat, they have some buckwheat. A chocolate vine, reasonably popular in Germany. However, there is only one place I know where it fruits. Unfortunately, this is in my street. It should be in season in September, but mine are not ripe yet. And here Mahonia, what would this be? Japonica, something like this. Out of season already. Here somebody has his own little garden in pots. What is it? This bayberry, tayberry, some sort of rubus, some sort of exotic rubus. More buckwheat, mangold, tomatoes. Those look like berry tomatoes. Yeah, but the leaves, they look more like normal tomatoes. Could this be a hybrid between berry tomatoes and cherry tomatoes? Please comment. The fruits are the size of peas. What do we have here? Other tomatoes, some sort of cabbage, a currant, a lot of kohlrabis, a fig tree, a blueberry. Oh, this, yeah, those zucchinis are, the plant is a bit small. A strawberry, yeah, it's nice. I like that nobody has destroyed this garden despite it being out in the open, so people here seem to be nice. More tomatoes. The grapes are not doing well. This cactus, they have to bring it in for the winter, of course. Oh, what is this? This is some crazy tomato. Yes, it's a, well, yes, it is a tomato. Look, produces nice big tomatoes, but the leaves, are they supposed to be like this? Huh, interesting. A normalish one right next to it. Here is a whole street with 3 hazelnuts and a lot of the, yeah, they come from quite dry areas in the Balkans and Danube areas, so they can deal quite well with the drought and the city climate. So as you can see, a lot of fruits. And yeah, the street already starts smelling like oil, like, yeah, because the cars crush them and then the oil gets rancid and then the street starts smelling. The smell is nice for some time, but when it gets too rancid, it's not nice anymore. A lot of people think that the 3 hazelnuts are not edible, that they are poisonous, but nope. This is a true hazelnut, despite being the only one that grows like a tree. The nuts might look different. They also taste different from other hazelnut species. Also, of course, the whole fruit looks very different in the 3 hazelnut. But still, they are really edible. And the crazy thing is, this year I found last year's hazelnuts in May and even in June, and they were still intact. There were still some of them which you could crack and eat. So a very nice, very prolific plant this year. Well, most of them are still on the trees, but they are very small and puny. There are years where the road is literally buried in hazelnuts, and you can collect them, I guess, just from this street. You can collect a couple tons in really good years. So yeah, if you don't mind the pollution in the city, this is a species that can give you really huge amounts of highly energetic, highly caloric nuts. Yeah, the hazelnut is one of the few nuts, which we call nuts and which is really a nut. Here, by the way, city champignons, Agaricus urbanus. This is the ancestor of the cultivated portobello mushroom. Well, yeah, 3 hazelnuts. Very good stuff, folks, and we will not have a lot of competition because the few people who know that this stuff is edible are being flooded by the giant amounts of tasty 3 hazelnuts. The European yew, one of the most toxic plants in Europe. The only part that's not toxic is the aril, the pink part, which people would call a fruit, but since it's a conifer, it's not a real fruit. Well, it's kind of a fruit, but not a real berry. However, even the seed inside is deadly. So, folks, never eat the seed, never swallow or chew it, never chew on the leaves. Better don't even eat the aril. I mean, yeah, it's not bad, but the risk of eating something that you shouldn't is unfortunately too high. This cotoneaster, most probably Zaliciifolios, seems to be almost ripe. Yeah, a nice sourness, but also a bitterness, which prevents this very prolific cotoneaster species from being a useful fruit for eating out of hand.